For the next video, we are going to look at complex shapes. And you can see I've just got a blank stage. Once again, the timeline is just hidden off to the side. We'll just work on one layer for now, so we don't even need to see it. And to get off to a more complex start, you can switch from the square tool, or the rectangle tool I should say, down to the polystar tool, and that's short for polygon and star tool, because you can do both over here in the option setting. You can toggle this to a star or keep it as a polygon, which is what we're going to do. So let's make an octagon, and we'll have 8 sides. So we've got something like this. And I'm just going to grab the entire shape, hit the Q key on the keyboard so I can free transform it. And then from there I'll just copy and paste it right back in place again. We've done that already a few times. And now we can, of course, just let go of this and, again, kind of connect the dots. Okay, so I'll grab the just a regular line tool here, and we will start connecting away. I myself need to get used to using the N hotkey more often for the line tool. So we'll all try to work on that together. For some reason, it's one of those hotkeys that I don't know if it's just like that one little increment too far over on the keyboard. The N is not that much further away than many of the other hotkeys I use. In fact, it's kind of closer together than some of them, but for some reason I don't go over there that often, and I mean I can kind of see why it does interfere a little bit with my microphone. So there we go. We've now got obviously a nice little polygon in perspective here, and you know, there's some fun things you could do as well by just kind of stacking this on top of one of your other polygons in dimension, and I mean that in itself is obviously like a little bit more complex, even though all we did was just kind of put it over top of another one. You could consider, and I'll just copy and paste this to do it, you could consider connecting these lines together, so now you've got something like this happening, which also looks a little bit fancier. And I mean, with that in mind, you can kind of keep this going sort of indefinitely by then taking another one and putting it up there. So you got something like that, and that's that looks kind of decent. I might play around with kind of distorting all of it so it's a little bit more kind of uniformly in perspective. So yeah, that's a good one. Obviously this would be a very complex one to shade too, but we've got a video for dealing with that a little bit later. Let's do this. Let's go and take let's go with just a line for right now. And this is a method I think you'll end up using quite a lot to make some of your best shapes. And what I'm actually doing is I'm creating the profile of it, or kind of the side view of this shape. And obviously you can see I'm doing some things that we haven't really done that much of yet, which is just making these kind of angles in here, almost like ramps, I guess. And I'll even kind of pull back more toward the inside of it. Come back out, go down again, and don't feel bad about leaving a little bit hanging off, because you can always delete that. And just to make it a little bit more interesting on this side over here, let's come in on it, and I mean you could do something like that. I was planning on just something straight. So then we'll delete off this part of it. And like I was saying, this will actually end up being what we see on the side. All right, and let me just make sure these are all connected together. Okay, so let's keep this shape over here, and then I'm going to squish it together like that. I'm also going to distort it. Okay. And then I'll copy and paste it. This one over here I'm going to make just about 95% smaller. All right. And again, that's something I could do after the fact too with the distort subkey. But I'll just go ahead and start with it like that. And now, again, we just kind of connect things together here, and be sure that snap is on. And I'll just go back and forth between the selection tool and the in or line tool. And you might need to zoom in a little bit just to be sure that you absolutely get the correct points to connect together. Okay, so that one's going to go to that one. This one is going to go to that one right there. That one will go right out there. This one to here. And I don't think you would see that connection right there, so we don't even have to worry about it. But now, start deleting these out. It's filled in. You've got a shape that this could be sort of, it actually kind of looks like the calf muscle and bottom part of a leg. Like, for example, if we were to make it a little bit thinner down this way, and just grabbing this middle handle right there to distort it further off to the side or skew it. And I mean, if I were to just kind of mock this up real quick, you might have something like this. Let's see if I can make it a bit fatter. So this could be the sort of the top portion of the leg, the top half right there. That would be the bottom half, your foot sticking out over here. But and obviously, as you just saw, you can do a lot with that one shape once you have it. This is maybe a little bit too sharp, I think, in perspective. Sort of like what we started with a bit more. It's actually a little bit more like that. And then you can also play around with, of course, just rotating it and seeing, kind of inspiring yourself what else this could be used for. And actually, these parts kind of look like they can naturally go together. Like this is a maybe the joint of you know, bringing two shapes together right there. So you got something like that happening. And this we could definitely make even more complex by doing some of the tricks that we were talking about earlier, taking parts out of it. So, for example, what we could do is we'll just grab actually I'll grab these lines right here because they're already kind of shaped. Whoops. They're already perspective wise kind of in line with what I have in mind. So we could take out like that part right there. And then, of course, you just have to deal with this, whatever little portion you're going to show of that interior wall coming back down. And then let's do something similar over here. This time, maybe we bring a little bit of it out. So then in that case, you can show this little sidewall, and so occasionally with that snap tool on, it doesn't want to snap perfectly, or it kind of wants to go and do its own little thing, so you've got to be careful of that. And then another thing you could consider is making a little slope. All right, so just coming down like so, and then just drawing a line up. And I've messed around with my perspective a little bit here. That's not perfect, I don't think. And the reason I say this is because this line is not running perfectly parallel to that one. Pull that back just a little bit. And in which case, then we would just get rid of that and that. Fill that back in. And I feel like this little side over here could also use something similar. I'm just gonna move everything over just a bit. So you've got line down this way. This line could just keep going off the direction it's going, so in which case I'll just sort of move this off to the side and then get that as close as I can to that little point or that connection right there, and then just delete it off. And hopefully those are actually touching. They're not, because if I zoom in, you should be able to see that they take a little while to zoom in. Occasionally that happens with Flash. Either my computer's doing something else, or it is just actually having trouble processing going in at that magnitude. All right, so those are now connected. And probably best to just take this line and move it right up here. Okay. Get rid of that. That is definitely a more complex shape, isn't it? It certainly looks like a shoulder when it's right up against this little thing. Whatever we would call that. I guess I need to bone up on my technical terms for like robot hinge parts and things like that. So anyway, if I did move that to another layer, in fact I'll do it right now. I'll cut that off and I'll put that under here just so these two parts don't intersect. So you could see how that could kind of swivel independent of this one, or really I should say this part right here would be the one to kind of pivot off of that thing. And you can see when you select anything, you can temporarily move the pivot point around. So I could move that little white dot right there, and then suddenly I'm rotating off of that central point. Another thing you can consider doing is taking a line and just adding a little flare through here. This sort of bleeds in a bit to what we're going to be talking about later with adding the real detail to these shapes. But if you just want to give yourself an idea now of how like more complex it could look, or technologically fancy, you can do some things like that. And again, this is in essence sort of like the sketching phase of what we're doing right here. And that's a pretty good shape. I like that. For some reason this feels like a shoulder to me. Another thing you could do is even just taking that same shape that we had before is, let me move this out of the way, doing some things that functionally don't make as much sense, all right, but just add some fun form to the to your beast. And one of those things is kind of like the sort of like a fin off the top of them. So let's suppose like this was the arm. You might have this sort of intimidating fin-like shape over here, and that lends itself to being, or you considering this to be something that could be transformed, right? Because you go, what is that thing? I don't know, but maybe it's part of the the other thing that it transforms into. So let's just take this and we'll sort of double it off to the side and connect things together. And actually, before I do that, before I let go here, you might want to try something like this. Take the pivot point and then skew it like so with the free transform tool. And you could kind of go either way with this. You could put it off to that side. So you've got a little bit more weight down here at the bottom, and then again do our little connect the dots thing. And I've made it a few videos into this without even showing you guys the dots. All right. At any time, you can go over here to your subselection tool and see the actual vector points that are making this up. So if you feel like, oop, maybe I made one too many vector points, you can always inspect your object that way. And we'll talk more about vector point using the pen tool and stuff like that later. For now, though, let's keep things relatively simple. So, of course, I'm just coming through here now and deleting out, oops, the part that we wouldn't see. And we got one more connection to make. And if you ever find that you are filling in a shape and you can't seem to make it fill in, you can play around with toggling these close small gaps, close medium gaps, and close large gaps. So if you do actually have a little bit of a place where your dots aren't meeting, your vector points aren't meeting, that's one way to handle that. And I'll just make this a flat line at the bottom. And this would probably be a part that would kind of tucked behind there anyway. So you can see the idea was something sort of like, I'll just use this as a temporary head. Little tiny head. So something like that. I guess while I'm at it, I could just take that whole thing, just put it over there to mock it up. But and then you can do, you know, all sorts of variations on this. But you might want to actually, let's do this. We got a little bit of time here. Let's start to put some things into a symbol. So I'm going to grab all of this shape, just make sure I've got all of it, and go over here to convert to symbol. The fastest way of doing that is just to hit F8 on your keyboard, and you can call this fin. We could call this part that I have right here joint. Again, I'm just hitting F8. This will be shoulder. So while you're kind of mocking things up, now you can copy and paste these all as like one complete piece, and it also means that they are in the library as well. So you can just drag them out like that, and if you make one change, or if you make a change to one of them, I should say, it's going to make that same identical change to all of them. Is that a good thing? Most of the time it's a great thing. Okay, so for example, if I started working inside of here and doing lots of shading and stuff like that, it's also going to do that over here on this this other one. Now, of course, the color of the light source would be different on this one because it's flipped around, and in which case you're going to want to go over here and hit your hotkey for duplicate symbol, or go to the slowest way possible, which is over here to symbol, and then duplicate symbol. And when I do that, if I've done it correctly, I should see this prompt right here that says give me a new name for it. So fin2, and then you'll see that show up in the library. And in which case now, if I do make a change to this one, it's not going to make that same change over there to that one. But as you can see, it made that change to this one because these are the same exact symbol. So use that to your advantage, and it's a kind of an essential part of what you might call cutout animation, or really just building up your library in Flash. And the only reason I was duplicating these to begin with was just to sort of play around with other things you could do to arrange those back there and kind of increase the complexity of your scene with little work, you know. So you could kind of double that object up on top of there, and then if you ever wanted to go back and break apart things, you go to the break apart tool. Before I do that though, let me move this into perspective, or move that. Yeah, there we go. And actually what I'll do is I'll increase the size of this just a little bit. So now you could take both those shapes, break them apart, and now of course you've connected them together as well because they were just right on top of each other before. And I don't know if it's a good idea or not to play around with. This is not a shape I tested building, but you know, that's sort of the fun of this, is just seeing what you can do by almost just throwing one shape on top of another and seeing where the chips fall. I'm not going to go any further with that one, although I could, well, yeah, I could kind of see how this would work. I think my original connections were sort of off here, like that line would go over there, but essentially you're just kind of like fattening that one out. But all right, what I want you to take away from this lesson is to play around with making these sort of flat shapes first, getting in like an interesting one-dimensional piece together, and then using that to extrude and come up with something a lot fancier like so.